what I'm going to talk to you today about is something I speak to a lot of students, is about how do you get lucky in life. Okay, and that's going to be, I'm going to talk to you about my story, and I'm not going to give you too much of gyan. I'm just going to talk to you about from the time I was born till where I am today, is basically, how I got lucky. And hopefully at the end of this whole session, you should be able to also take away on how you can get lucky. And it's not difficult. Getting lucky is not difficult at all. And I hope you'll be able to learn from my life, how you can get that. So as Tarun said, Tarun and I have been fortunate to have spent 2 years together at SPJ. And subsequently, we've pretty much been in touch, while he was in London, I was in Hong Kong, I was in New York, and just like Tarun, he's traveled around the world. And then I'm quite fortunate that we're both back together in Bombay in our respective times of our careers, and we're good family friends, and we meet quite often and chat quite often. And then I was also fortunate to come to your university, the Universal Business School, about a year and a half ago for your function, your graduation ceremony. I was fortunate to come and see your campus. So that day I was quite challenged to come all the way from Bandra all the way to Karjat. But today I cannot give any excuse that I'm going to be late because I was in a car. So let's start our story. I originally come from a place in the south of India called Cochin. I came from a very ordinary family. My dad was a lawyer. My mother, got married quite young when she was about 18. In our parents' times, they get quite early on. In my other family, I've got an older sister who's about 3 years older to me. And I went to a very ordinary school, a nearby school, nothing great, never produced. At that point in time, I was the second batch of students coming out of my school. Pretty much everybody in the same kind of social economic, right? Later, we didn't have computers, of course, during that time. We all walked to school. I loved walking to school because it was the best time of my life, because you could do all kinds of stuff, walking to school, 3 or 4 friends. And then subsequently, obviously, you started going in a cycle, which my kids, etc., miss these days. So went to an ordinary school. I got my first bicycle when I was 11 years old, and it got stolen when I was 16. Somebody, we had no gate in our house, and somebody walked into. I forgot to lock my bicycle one time. Somebody came at night and walked away with the cycle. We got our first television in 1986, which is when I was 14, and this was around the Olympics, just after the Olympics. 1984 was the Los Angeles Olympics, and television in India had come around that time. Black and white color television came in along with the 1984 Olympics. I think many of you were not. I'm sure none of you were born in 1984. So listen, I just want to highlight to you that during those times, very ordinary lives. We lived in a one bedroom house, or 1 2-bedroom house at the point in time. But one thing that I was very different from a number of my classmates is that I was extremely curious. I was really curious to know about everything in life. I would read pretty much everything that was there. And the reason for that is that I had a family that had different interests. My grandfather was an ex-army person, but he used to work in the British Army in Africa, in Kenya. And so was my father. My father, was a lawyer, but he came also from a farming family. His dad was a farmer, but they both had extreme interest in sport and in reading. My dad eventually became a lawyer, and my grandfather worked in the army. But both of them, there are two things in common. They used to read a lot. They used to read newspapers. When I was young, we used to have 4 or 5 newspapers at home. So it was like reading the newspaper was like an entire ritual every morning. And we used to literally read 2 English newspapers, 3 Malayalam newspapers. Same with my grandfather. We used to have lots of magazines at home. I know you remember there was a magazine called Reader's Digest. There was Time. So we used to read a lot, and because of my dad and my grandfather. My mother's side, my mother had 3 brothers, and all of them had extreme love for music, English music. And if you know Kerala a little bit, a lot of the Keralites enjoy, Western rock music, and I picked that up from my uncles. My grandmother was an amazing cook. So very typical lower middle class family. But one of the things that I therefore developed with all these people around me, with my family, is that I had an extreme love for football, extreme love for cricket, and a lot of sports. I pretty much tried out every sport that both my grandfather and father tried out. And then enjoyed music, enjoyed cooking food along with my grandmother, and of course had strong values built up from my parents and my grandparents. What was also important during that time was my parents, both of them had done their masters, and for us, getting high scores in school was critical. There was no choice. My dad and mom had very clear, listen, you had to be in the top 3 in the class. But listen, I always had classes where there were always at least 5 people better than me. So to get to a top 3 was almost difficult, impossible. So, and coming first was almost impossible, right? So, and with all my sports and everything, music, etc., there was no chance that I could spend enough time on everything else. But one thing that was instilled very early on in my life was getting high scores in education, and learning was critical. And we had no choice. Absolutely no choice. School, education, getting great education was critical. I studied until my grade 12 in Cochin, and then I realized that Cochin, of course, is a big. It's not a big city, right? It's a small city. And then I decided to move to Bombay when I was 17 to come and study here. And you remember, right? I told you that my grandmother was a great cook. I loved food. I loved cooking, and I loved eating as well. And it was my dream that time to open my own hotel. Right? I really wanted to open my own hotel or my own restaurant when I was 17. So what did I do? I decided to pursue my passion, and I came to Bombay, and I decided to study at the Institute of Hotel Management, which is in Dadar in Bombay. If any of you have been in Kedal Road, it's basically on the way. Anyway, if you go from Mahim to Worli, it's on the left-hand side. And at 17, I left home to come to Bombay. But one thing that Bombay immediately strikes you, and I think you probably all of you have come from outside Bombay, will strike you, is that listen, Bombay is just full of street smart people. I coming from a small city, and you come to a large city. So I realized everybody seems to be very smart. Everybody is about doing stuff. They are always, making cash. They're entrepreneurs. So you always feel like, wow, this is an amazing place. But Bombay also teaches you that it's full of hardworking people. People are, get up at 4, 5 in the morning. Like I used to live in Dadar, and one of the things that you learn is people get up extremely early. They're in the moving stuff, going to work, taking the fast trains from 3 hours away, and they reach back home at 10, 11, have their dinner. So people are working extremely, extremely hard. So people get up early, sleep late. It was about Bollywood. Even when I came here in 1989 into Bombay, Bombay was all about entrepreneurship. People did things. People did something new and made lots of money and were successful. My family barely could give me money to pay my fees, during that time. And if I had to do anything else, I had to do everything on my own. I mean, I had to do something on the side. So what I did that time was in 19 1991, and it's a real story. Okay, in 1991, a friend of mine and I, we decided to start a company called NG's Party Mix. And basically, what we did was we decided to. This is basically the event management, the history of event management. Okay, we should go to some of these big private parties like the pyramids and the shades of GE shipping, and and we used to actually provide the food and the drinks and the entertainment for these people. And then I realized soon after about a couple of years doing this, I was actually making a lot of money, and therefore I didn't need money from home. So in my last year of college, I took no money from my family, and I was quite happy. Uh, and then I finished my hotel administration. I joined a company which is called ITC Hotels, which is you probably know they have a lot of hotels across the country. I joined them as a management trainee, but one thing I realized that in the hotel industry as well, the people who really made it to the top were people who were the commercial function. There were people from finance, people from marketing, people from but it's basically the operational people didn't really make it to the top. So one thing I got advice is, listen, somebody told me, listen, you need to do your MBA. So this is my second year of PNG, and then I got lucky again. My boss, or the general manager of PNG India, had met up with the general manager of PNG in the Middle East, and they were at a common function. And the guy from the Middle East said, "Listen, we need a couple of people from India because you seem to have very smart people. You recommend somebody to come and work in the Middle East." And so the India general manager said, "Of course, we have lots of people." But what was funny was, this is you're talking the Middle East, and the work permit was to go to Saudi Arabia, okay, which, as you know, is a very strict Islamic country. And as luck would have it, that year they were not giving any visas to, let's say, to Hindu, people with a Hindu religion. I honestly don't know why. And I was luckily the only Christian in that whole group, and and they had no choice but to select me. And imagine, that's how lucky it was. And I got selected. Then I moved to PNG in Saudi Arabia, and worked extremely hard. And then after about 3 years in Saudi Arabia, I then moved to a company called Reckitt Benckiser in Dubai. Again, I want to tell you another story. So I working with Reckitt Benckiser, and one of the things that Reckitt wanted to do was test out something of how to enter a new market, and thankfully selected the Middle East, or because we had lots of markets. Middle East is about 38 different markets. So they said, listen, trying to try out entry of Reckitt Benckiser into one of the countries, and I got to lead a project of entering into the Moroccan market. How to, for a new company to enter the Moroccan market. And thankfully, it went well. The whole world was watching it. And after the first couple of years, it was seen as a success model of getting into a new market. And the people from London, where the headquarters were, they came down to Morocco, and I was there. And they found that, listen, there's somebody who was actually making things happen in Morocco. And they decided to select me to move to London, to their global headquarters. So another, kind of chances of getting lucky. When I reached London, now I'm going to take a pause and I'm going to ask Tarun. Tarun, have you been following the story well? Should I slow down or go faster? Or
no, perfect. Keep going.
So moved to London to the global headquarters of Reckitt Benckiser. But one of the things that I was always taught. This was about, I had finished 2 years in India, 3 years in Saudi, another 3 years in. So I finished about 8 years in total. And then in London, one of the things that I came across was, listen, I really wanted to study further, and London gave me the opportunity to work and study at one of the best business schools in the world, which was the London Business School. And as luck would have it, I had written my GMAT in the year 2000. Yeah, in the year 2000, I got a very average score, 640. And to most business schools, you needed a 720 kind of thing. And as luck would have it, in 2005, when I was applying, that was the last, let's say, 2 or 3 months where I could actually show the GMAT score. Applied, my boss gave me a good recommendation. Eventually, got into the London Business School for my MBA. And again, if you remember my story, right, this is always my parents used to keep telling me, listen, you have to be in the top of the class and you have to work super hard. And in MBA in London Business School, you don't even have a chance to be top of the class. You just have a chance to basically pass, to kind of keep your head alive. And I took the toughest courses. This time I didn't want to do marketing. I took the toughest finance courses. Was with people who are like Tarun. All of them are Forex experts, private equity experts. I barely passed all my finance electives. And I did that simply because, not to get my MBA, I did that simply because I wanted to learn finance. I wanted to learn everything about finance, which I had not learned during my last 8 years in Reckitt and PNG. I promise you that the amount of hard work that I put in, even today I feel good because I can sit in front of any banker, I can sit in front of any finance director, and I can really talk good finance. And it's just because I put in that hard work, not to get a grade, but to really learn. And then eventually, I finished my MBA, and the company moved me to the Netherlands. I became the head of marketing for their Dutch subsidiary. And then, as Tarun mentioned, I also got a chance to work in private equity. And then the private equity company that I worked for, they sold the business that I was heading. I was a VP for their business. And then I said, listen, when they sold the business, you obviously have to exit. And then Nivea, which is the parent company, Beiersdorf, came calling, and I became the head of marketing for their Northern European business. And listen, to be honest, I did. There was lots of good stuff that we did there, and eventually, came to Dubai, headed up their marketing function, and then after 3 years, eventually, came down to India to head up the Indian business. Just want to tell you one last story, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. And in between my time in Netherlands and the time I moved to Dubai, I decided to write a book about my experiences in my career, in my marketing life. And I decided to write a book, and basically the idea started when I had just left my Reckitt job and I was just joining private equity. And a lot of my, my former juniors and a lot of my friends' kids, they used to call me while I was taking this break. They said, listen, Neil, can you tell us, do we need to do an MBA? After the MBA, should we join this company, that company? A lot of career advice, basically, right? So I said, yeah, you should do this, you should do that. And every time I was giving them advice, and all these people said, wow, that's fantastic advice. And I was giving the same advice. I was telling them, listen, do your MBA. You must join a great company. You must join marketing. You should join sales. You should work hard. And everybody was saying, wow, this such fantastic career guidance. But what I learned was everybody was finding this valuable, the stories I was telling them. And I said, listen, there must be some value in making that into a book about people on, listen, how do you get your career ahead? So I decided to write a book. And as you can imagine, I've never done literature, and I decided to write the book, and I wrote a couple of pages, and I showed it to my wife, and my wife said, "Listen, Neil, this is going to be terrible. You can't write. You can do good business management, but you're terrible at writing." So she just threw it out, and I said, "Wow, listen, this is not going to work." But I said, "Listen, the idea still remained a fascinating one." So I said, "Listen, let me do something different, but I still have the idea, but let me do something different." I scanned around. One of the things that I was very passionate about when I was a kid, I used to love comics. I had a massive collection of comics. There was, I know you know this, there was comics like Phantom, there was Mandrake, there was Garfield, there was a comic series called Mad. So listen, I had Archie's and Veronica. You had Asterix, there was Tintin. So I still have a massive collection of comic books. And then I said, "Listen, guess what? Nobody's ever written a business book, but in a comic form." So I said, "Listen, let me try and make a book like a comic, but with a real story. But I have a problem. I can't draw, I can't write." So I decided to scan the internet. I'd started this project in 2010, and I scanned the internet, and I came across this guy who was drawing Dracula comics, and he was somewhere in Eastern Europe. So I contacted him on the email. Listen, that time there was no WhatsApp, there was no Instagram. I contacted him on email, and I said, "Listen, I have this idea of a book. Can you make it into a comic book?" He said, "Yeah, fine." Never met. He said, "Fine, but listen, this is what I'm going to charge you. It's by page, it's by panel." I said, "Fine." So we started the work. So I've never met this guy. I used to write the story out. After about 3 years, this guy just disappeared. I had done about 80 pages of the comic, and this guy just doesn't respond to any of my emails, and he just disappears into the. I called him, doesn't take my phone, and they were stuck with this 80 pages of comic, and I've got nowhere to go. So I said, "Listen, I'm not going to give up. I still think it's a great idea," and I gave a short break, about 6 months, and then I again searched. Now I'm now in 2014. And I searched the net, and the technology had got a lot better. I find these twins on the internet, and a representative that represents them. I got in the hold of the representative. I said, "Listen, this is my idea. Can you do it for me?" So I looked at this art of these twins, and I realized that this is even far better than the guy who drew the Dracula comics. So I gave the work again to these guys, and we restarted the comic book completely all over, because the original 80 pages had to be thrown out because it's a different style. Started the work all over again. It took me another 2 years to finish the book, and in between I had met a lot of publishers, and I told them about my book. Everybody said, "Great idea, but we're not going to publish this book." So I decided to do the self-publishing of my book. Okay, and I self-published it, and the company then basically printed it and put it up on Amazon.com, Amazon in India, etc. And just like this, I used to talk in a lot of forums. And once I was talking about my book, and this guy, after the meeting, he came up to me and said, "Listen, why don't you have a publisher?" I said, "Listen, I don't have a publisher because nobody wants to touch my book." So he said, "Listen, give me your card." I gave him a card and I sent him a copy of my book. And literally about a month later, listen, one step back. Just when I was publishing, I was moving to India as the managing director. And on the day I joined, I met this old friend of mine called Shantanu. And Shantanu is now the CEO of Pidilite. And I was telling Shantanu, I've just come back to India, I bought this book. Listen, can you get me some publicity? So he said, "Listen, fine, Neil, I'll try and help you." He used to work with Hindustan Times that time. The next morning, this is May 1st of 2017. I just started my new job. On May 1st of 2017, at breakfast, the editor-in-chief of The Mint. You must have heard of the newspaper called The Mint. The Mint, the editor-in-chief lands up in my hotel and says, "Listen, I want to have breakfast with you." Then Shantanu has sent me, "Let's have a chat about your book." We're having breakfast at the Taj in Delhi. I tell him about the story, and then he tells me, "Listen, the reason why I decided to come and meet you is that I used to run the comic series at Bits Pilani, and I used to write, be the writer on comics. And I found that a corporate guy doing comics seemed very interesting. That's why it is. Otherwise, I never meet anybody because I hate all you corporate guys." He took down everything about me, and I left breakfast. I finished my meetings in Delhi, and that Saturday, uh, I wake up and I'm in Bombay and I was staying in one of the hotels. I wake up and there's like I've got lots of calls on my phone, and everybody said, "Listen, Neil, what's this? You never told us about your book." I said, "Listen, how did you know? I mean, even lots of people don't know." They said, "Guess what? Look at the Mint." So in the Saturday Mint, there's a full page article about my comic and about me. I mean, can you imagine? It's in the national newspaper on the Saturday edition, and pretty much the whole world knows about it, right? So super lucky that somebody has put it up in the news, and then Times of India called me, and then India Today called me, and then all the newspapers and magazines called me, and then coming back, so I send my book, my self-published book, to this guy, and he said, "Listen, I work for HarperCollins." I said, "Whoa, HarperCollins, the biggest publishing company in the world?" I said, "Yeah." So I said, "Yeah, so what are the chances of my book getting published by HarperCollins?" He said, "It's 50-50. Not at 50-50, I don't think it's a good chance because this is the first time somebody's written a comic in marketing. I don't think it's going to work out." Fine, okay. Anyway, self-published, it's up to you. But 3 or 4 months later, I get a call from HarperCollins saying, "Listen, we've signed you on. We're signing your book. We're signing the global rights. We're giving you, the stuff." And I just wanted to just share with you basically the book that basically got published. It's called Building the Perfect Beast, and you can see it's by HarperCollins on the top right hand corner. One of the most happiest moments in my life is, basically after about 7 years, I had self-published a book. It's my story, and the world's best publisher had published it completely out of thin air. Super lucky, and so listen, I'm super happy. I hope I'll send some books to Tarun, and you can read in the library. It's a full-on comic. You'll enjoy reading it. It's about life in corporates. So Tarun, I'll send you a few books for your library, and then you can hand it around your group. So listen, I want to stop the story by saying, what I come from a very I had an ordinary life very early on. I just had amazing people around me. My family. When I came to Bombay, it's just the whole of Bombay around me. I came to SP Jain, amazingly better people than me. I joined the top guys in the world, and I joined LBS with even better guys in the world. But there is a theme that, and all the time you see it, right? I just got lucky. I seriously got lucky. I got lucky maybe 20 times in my life. But there's one or two things that go around as a thread across my life. The first one is, make sure that you're always surrounding yourself with people who are better than you. Don't ever be the best person in a room. Okay, make sure that you're going to a room with people who are better than you. Make sure your friends are far better than you, far wiser than you, and that's how you learn. Be extremely passionate about what you do. Make things happen. Be curious. Okay, be curious about everything. Keep learning all your life. I promise you. Even last year, I went and did a course. Be a lifelong learner. Listen, and obviously work very, very hard. Work hard. Put those 24 hours. There's no other option but to work hard in a world that's got even more tougher. Be a learner. That's if you think be a learner throughout your life, try out new things, and I promise you, you will get lucky. That's just my story.